What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, NVIDIA, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with tomorrow, as we have Jerome Powell giving a speech, not to mention new news about Tesla and the markets. But let me just mention that I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the markets. Looking at Tesla, we're not in a very, very good place right now for the bulls because of the fact that Tesla is barely at this support. We ended up losing this critical support right here, which was holding Tesla up at this trend line. See this big trend line, Tesla bounced off this 1, 2, 3 times. And today we ended up closing below this, which is not the best of signs. So because Tesla may be breaking this trend line, we're just barely holding this support right here at this 210 area. If we lose this, there's going to be a bigger drop coming to Tesla. If we don't, things will also be very, very complicated. So I will break down more information about this, about why on earth, if we do get this bounce, how we could be retesting this resistance. But it's going to depend a lot on what Jerome Powell ends up saying. So I'm going to be talking about that first before I break down these levels on Tesla and SPY. Firstly, for tomorrow, it's going to be Friday, August 23rd, 2024 at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have Jerome Powell giving a speech. And as you guys know, when the guy opens his mouth, the market loves to move. He speaks 30 minutes after the market opens, and whatever he says will affect us. Now, Jerome Powell could say all sorts of different things, and it's going to have a big effect on the markets because he could be giving us hints about interest rates. Right now, the market is very, very confident we're going to get some kind of cut, whether it's 25 or 50 basis points. But Jerome Powell will give us more confirmation about that. Whatever he says will affect that. Now, whether or not he is ambiguous will affect the markets. If the guy keeps saying he doesn't know what's going to happen, it depends on the data. The market may not like that. The market could dip. If the guy is confident, he says there's going to be a cut. If he confirms that, the market could get a bounce. So it all depends on what this guy says. We'll just have to be very, very prepared for this. He's speaking in Jackson Hole, by the way, in Wyoming, so get ready for that. The market currently thinks there's a 75% chance we get a 25 basis point cut and a 25% chance we get a 50 basis point cut right now for the September 18th FOMC meeting. He may be talking about that and the economy, so get ready for that. It's going to be very impactful. Now, just note, guys, I'm not really a fortune teller. I don't know what's going to happen for sure. So I can't promise anything objectively. I can't say with 100% certainty what I think will happen will come true. But I can tell you that I'll give you guys my best shot at trying to predict how this will go in just the next couple of minutes. For a few more things worth noting, right now the market is quite neutral. We were more greedy, now we're kind of shifting more towards the neutral area. And then if anything, the market is still greedy in terms of momentum, but that is slowing down just a little bit. Sorry, the chart's like right here. And then when it comes to other things, the puts and call option positioning is at greed. We're starting to stagnate right over here, so we'll see if this bounces or not. Volatility is also neutral. The VIX is trying to bounce, so we'll see how that goes. And besides that, that's what I'm seeing, at least for the market moving forward. For other factors out there, I just want to mention that SPY's puts to call ratio is at 1.89, and we have max pain at 551. If SPY loses 556 tomorrow and we fail to hold above it, we're going to likely see a dip all the way down to about 551. Just want to give you guys a heads up about that. For other factors about the market, I just want to mention that we have Kava, not to mention Ross, announcing their earnings. Kava ended up doing relatively well. They beat on EPS and revenue and had good guidance. That's why the share price is up. And then for Ross, they had very, very interesting earnings. Ross ended up beating on EPS. They also beat on revenue, but their guidance for Q4 was not the best. So that would have been negative for the share price. However, they also announced that guidance for 2024 as a whole for the fiscal 2024 was above expectations, and that's what saved the share price. That's why the share price is up in the after hours. One piece of news that's making all the headlines is this: BMW is topping Tesla in EV sales in Europe for the first time. Is that true? Sure, you could say that for the month of July, because in July, BMW did they did over 14,000 sales, 14,869, whereas Tesla did 14,561. Now, I made a video about this earlier, so if you guys look at my second to last video, I talked about this already. This is not necessarily the full comprehensive picture, because if you look at the first half of 2024 EV sales, BMW did only about under 180,000 in total, whereas Tesla did over 830,000. So I showed you guys the charts, the numbers in my second to last video if you guys want to watch that one. But for now, I'm not going to go over all the details. I just want to say that for the overall year, Tesla's still well ahead of many of its competitors. But in Europe, Tesla's seen a slight decline in its sales as competition is growing and because of many different factors such as tariffs and such. But for now, I just want to say that we're not too worried about that. Tesla's still, doing relatively well. compared to like its other competitors. Just BMW did a little bit more, at least for just one specific month. But besides that, Tesla's still leading when it comes to the first half sales of the year. So I just wanted to call that out. Tesla saw a little bit more volume than yesterday at about 76 million. And some good news is Baird, Piper Sandler, and many other analysts are saying Tesla will outperform the market eventually. I think Tesla will eventually. Now, the price price ratio dipped a little bit. We're going to be watching to see if we get some kind of bounce or not. And also, when it comes to seasonality, just know that Fridays tend to be green only about 49% of the time. So that being said, let's now just focus on the charts and break down what I see essentially happening, what's going on with Jerome Powell and the other factors. Well, for Tesla, we have to remember the resistance and support levels because I'm not really a fortune teller. I don't know exactly what will happen, and this will give you some insights. But I will give you guys my prediction in just a minute. So for Tesla, look at this 212 areas resistance, our 200 EMA. If that breaks, we're looking at the 214s. This is where this trend line happens to be. If that breaks, our next target is going to be all the way up here to 217 and then eventually 220. If we end up rejecting, we lose this 210 support. Look at 208. And if that fails us, we're going to be coming all the way down towards 205, then 202. Now, in my personal opinion, what do I think is going to happen? Jerome Powell could be very interesting. When the guy spoke recently, he has been very optimistic about the economy. So there's a chance the market may rebound a little bit, but I don't know if the move is going to last. So my prediction for Tesla is this. I think tomorrow Tesla will rebound towards this trend line and reach this 214 to 215 area. If Jerome Powell causes a pump and dump, we could pump to that and then reject. If we break through this, we could push a little higher. But I suspect the most likely possibility is we kind of pump to the resistance and then we reject. I say we may reject because of how we're looking on the daily. The daily looks pretty weak, and we have some gaps to fill on Tesla, not to mention the markets. So I suspect that this daily is going to lead to more downside. It looks very bearish. So we might pop a bit and then reject even lower. So I'm not going to promise anything, though. It depends on what Powell says. I don't know what he's going to say for sure, but that's what I suspect to be the most likely possibility, looking at technicals, patterns, and other factors like that. How about for SPY? You have to have a game plan for tomorrow. Just to be very, very frank, we're still holding 556 as key support. If we lose that tomorrow, look for 553, 551, and eventually the 540s as we have that gap to fill. If we're bullish, look for 558s to break. If we break that, the 560s are coming. In my personal opinion, I suspect the most likely possibility is this. So if you look at the daily, right, you're going to be noticing that we have this bearish looking daily candlestick and we have a lot of gaps to fill below. So we could be starting the signs of a potential downtrend, especially as we have this bearish engulfing candle. So I suspect that what's going to happen is this. If we were to lose 556, guys, that's your trigger for the bears. The bears are going to be a lot stronger if we lose that support. But I don't think it might. I think it might not happen immediately. I think that what might happen is Jerome Powell pumps us a little bit. He might cause a little pump depending on what he says, just temporarily, and then the move could fail, whether we go to 558 or 560, and then we could fail and continue to dip, and then we could be making our way back down to 553 if 556 breaks. So a pop and drop is very probable. If 556 breaks, we're easily going down to 553 or lower, and I suspect that's the most likely possibility. But just to be safe, it depends on the data and what Powell says, so we'll just have to wait and see. For NVIDIA, we have 124.7 as resistance, 126.5, and then eventually the 130 area. We have support at 122, followed by 120. I suspect NVIDIA may pop a little bit to 126, if not 128, then reject and start dipping lower. I think we have a double top and we're going to eventually be dipping down to these imbalances. I think there's going to be more downside coming. But we might pop first before we start dipping, thanks to what Jerome Powell says most likely. For Bitcoin, we're starting to turn bearish in the 4-hour and also the daily time frame. I think we might be testing resistance. We have the 60,500 and 60,800 resistance. I have support at 60,200. We may pop and drop, and I think that's the most likely possibility as well. For ES, the same pattern may develop. We're trying to rebound right now. If we could try to get back and hold above the 5600s, we could be looking for 5613 and 5625. If we reject off that range, we could pop a bit, then start dipping. And if we lose support at 5580, we're looking for basically 5560. So I suspect we rebound a little bit and then we make our move back down lower. I think that's the most likely possibility. For other factors out there like NQ is kind of flat right now. We're basically looking at 19,700 as resistance. We have a support at 19,500. So I think we might rebound a little bit to this resistance and then reject and start dipping lower. I suspect that's what this is going to do. I also think that NQ has a bearish looking structure on the daily, so that makes me suspect downside is likely coming. We might rebound a bit and then start dipping lower towards the lower 19,000s. That's the most likely possibility right now. For the QQQ, just like SPY, we haven't officially lost critical support. We have it at 473 right now. In my opinion, we have these gaps to fill below, and we have a very bearish looking engulfing candle. So this typically suggests downside is going to be coming. But I suspect, depending on Jerome Powell, he might cause a little pop first. If he does cause a pop, we'll be looking for 476 as resistance, 479, then 480. And for support, make sure you watch 475, then 473. If 473 breaks, we're dipping down to about 469 for a big rug pull. I suspect it will pop a bit and then start dipping. I think that's the most likely possibility. We'll see what Jerome Powell says just to be safe. For Aapl, we have resistance at this 226 area, not to mention 227, and we have support at 223.8, not to mention 222. We may pop a bit and start dipping down to the 222 area, so watch for that. For Palantir, now I'm just going to focus on the rest of these and be kind of quick with this. We have a double top leg structure that's starting to develop on Palantir, so be very, very mindful of that. I suspect that this could also lead to some downside if we fail to hold above 32, and that would take us all the way down to about 31.35, followed by 30.7. Watch resistance at 32.5. If we break that, we push higher. I suspect the double top is going to lead to a little pop and then a drop all the way down to the lower 30s. For Supermicro, we have 610 as our resistance, not to mention 620, and we have support all the way down here around this 599 area, not to mention 580. I suspect with the double top forming, we may pop a bit and start dipping lower, and 580 looks like a very, very strong possibility for this imbalance to fill. I suspect that Supermicro will be dipping lower with the double top. That's the most likely possibility. We could pop first and start dipping back down, and I think that there's going to be more downside nonetheless. For Rivian, we have a big downtrend that's being respected right over here off this bearish wedge. I could be looking for a move all the way down towards these lower levels. We called out this bearish wedge for many, many days now, and I think that it's finally starting to play out. It's taking us all the way down towards the low 12s. I do see a more downside likely coming. For SoFi, we have this trend line right over here acting as our support. So notice this big white trend line. I suspect what's going to happen is we might touch the trend line. Maybe we pop a bit and then start dipping. We could retest 7.3 and then start dipping down to about 7.14 towards the trend line. If we lose that, we'll be dipping down to 7. And if we hold this, we could try to rebound. I see a risk of us dipping down to the lower 7s. I think that there is more downside potential. For the IWM Russell 2000, we have resistance at this 216 area, and we have support at 213. We've been stuck in this range for the last couple of days. If we start dipping, so we could pop a bit to 215, then reject. And if that's the case, we'll be looking at this big trend line as our support, because when you zoom out and kind of go back like this, you'll notice that we're riding this trend line, this 200 area. We've been riding this since we hit the 200s. So we bounced 1, 2, 3 times. And this could be a sign that we might test the trend line and try to rebound. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. But in my personal opinion, I think there's a risk of us dipping lower. If we hit this trend line and lose this, we could be dipping down to about 212, if not 210. So watch that very, very carefully. That's going to be very, very critical for us. For AMD, we're looking a little bit more bearish. We hit this high here. We came down, made a lower high. So this could be a sign of a trend shift. If we don't reclaim 153, we're going to be dipping down to 148. If we reclaim 153, we could try to bounce, but this favors a move down all the way down to the 148 area. For ARM, we're stuck in between this range. We have support at this 128 area, also at 129.67. And we have resistance up here around 132. We've been going back and forth and back and forth. I favor we might be testing 128. We might pop a bit and start dipping down to 128. If that fails, this will be tipping all the way down towards 125. This also could be forming kind of like a head and shoulders. We have like a left shoulder here, a head, maybe a right shoulder. So that could lead to a pop and drop and maybe a dip here and then a move to the downside. So be very careful. Just know that that's very, very possible. So please remember that, guys. That's going to be very, very critical. So the market still has some more downside potential. We'll see how things end up going. Let me just double check this. Coinbase, we're looking a little bit more bearish looking at this daily structure. There are sometimes fake outs on this chart, just like how it dipped and got a bounce. So tomorrow, I think we could retest 200, if not 202, and then we'll see if we reject off that. The overall structure is still kind of consolidating, so it's not really making much of a direction just yet, unless we lose 192. So I suspect we might pop a bit, retest 200, then start dipping back down. If 197 fails us on the dip, we're going down to 192. Pop and drop is the most likely possibility. For Amazon, Amazon is also looking a little bit more bearish. We're continuing to reject right over here. One thing worth mentioning is the fact that we have this trend line that was critical support for us. Notice how we have kind of failed to hold above this. So we're losing this support. We bounced off this 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Now we're losing this. We need to break past this trend line in 180 to turn back up. And if we lose 175, we're going to likely be dipping down to this imbalance towards, let me just double check, towards 172. So if 175 breaks, 172 is coming. Not to mention 168. So I think what's going to happen is this. See the support right here at the 50 EMA. This might act as support. We might see a little rebound off of that. We could retest 178 or so, and then we may continue to dip. And I think that this imbalance will fill, and we're going to eventually see a big rug pull, a pop and drop. That's the most simple way I could describe it. The daily on Amazon looks kind of bearish. We have this big gap to fill, so I suspect we're going to be coming back down here. So I think that's what could be happening to Amazon on the daily as we look more bearish. Could we rebound a little tomorrow in the morning? Yes, we could, depending on what Jerome Powell says. Then we could be dipping to fill that gap. For Meta had a nice bearish divergence. I just want to call out this. This has a double top like structure on the hourly time frame, also on the 4-hour time frame. So that could lead to a big shift right over here. We watch to see if that ends up being the case. So as you guys can see, we have resistance currently around this 537 area. We have support around 530. If that fails us, we'll be dipping down to 524. The bearish divergence in the double top. I think that we could be testing 530 and then start dipping. I do suspect that's the most likely possibility. I think that we might rebound in the morning first, then come down to 530 and eventually start dipping. This looks more bearish as we're seeing a liquidity grab right here. Generally, these wicks do lead to downside. So it does favor downside for tomorrow, if not by next week. For Microsoft, let me double check this. We look a little bit more bearish because we lost structure right here. We had support right here around 418. We lost that. So I think we might rebound, try to retest our rejection area. So that 418 area could be retested. Then we might be dipping down to this imbalance, forming a nice double top, taking us all the way down towards 408. I think 410 and 408 could be coming. This not actually resembles more like a head and shoulders. So I think there's more downside potential nonetheless. For Google, I just want to mention that we called out 166 yesterday, and that's where we went to. And I said if that breaks, we'll dip even lower. So I suspect that we could retest 166, maybe a little bit higher before we continue lower. This imbalance to 163 will likely fill. So I think we may pop and drop and start dipping to lower levels. So I find that to be very, very probable. For GameStop's looking a little bit more bearish right now, especially as we have this head and shoulders. I think GameStop's going to be dipping much lower down to about the 21s very soon. Looks a little bit more bearish to me. AMC looks more bearish. It's failing to hold above 4.96. By failing to hold above that, we are once again favoring the downwards direction. So that's looking a lot more favorable to me. For others out there, we also happen to have DJT. I know people are interested in this one. This rebounded, trying to get back above 24.5, but it failed. So look at resistance around 23.32. We got to get back above that to try to bounce for 23.6. If we fail to hold support, we'll be dipping down to this imbalance. I think we might pop and then drop down low, so watch that very carefully. For the VIX, let me just say the 4 hours looking more bullish. We have, let me just double check, 17.86 as our resistance. If this breaks, I think that our next target is going to be all the way up here around the 19 area. The VIX is trying to break out, but I'm noticing that the VIX is testing the 50 EMA. So this implies that the VIX has some tough resistance. It might try to break through that. We'll have to see depending on Jerome Powell's speech. Why? Because the stock market is at some key support. SPY has 556, the QQQ has 473. The market is at key support. The VIX is at key resistance. We'll see if we get a little bounce in the markets thanks to Powell, or if we get a bounce and then a big rug pull, which leads the VIX to breaking out. The VIX could break out and then the market could dip. We'll see about that. The 10-year Treasury yield is going to make a big move depending on Jerome Powell's speech. That's going to be heavily dictated by what the market's suspecting when it comes to interest rates right over here. That's going to affect the 10-year, so we'll see what that leads to. And then finally, the dollar is trying to rebound right here. We're at resistance. We're going to be watching to see if we break past 101.5. If that's the case, that could be bearish for the markets. If not, if it rejects here, the market could rebound. So in my opinion, okay, it all depends on Jerome Powell's speech. Okay, that's like the honest truth about the morning. My suspicion is that we might rebound a little bit. We might see a little rebound, and then upon the rebound, the market may not last. It might just be another lower high the market makes before it continues lower, and I still think there's more downside coming looking at the daily charts. So that's what my opinion is on the markets. I don't know exactly how it's going to go with his speech, but I suspect he may cause a pump and dump like move. That's very, very probable. But please, guys, don't throw stones at me if I am wrong. You know, this is very difficult. I can't predict what Powell will say. That's why you want to be careful in the days he speaks. But nonetheless, guys, I did tell you it's the most likely move based off technicals and a bunch of different factors like that. So with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great day, night, or evening. I know I'm kind of late at recording this today. I had some technical difficulties, but everything has been settled. So it's great to hear that. If anything, Take care, guys. I'll be back tomorrow before the market opens to give you guys another update on how things are looking. I'm very excited to see what Jerome Powell has to say, so we'll see how things go. So that being said, thank you for listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow. Thank you, and peace out.